Welcome to Module 6, the Delivery of Social Welfare Services. Some key takeaways we want you to have from this particular module and Chapter 5 of the textbook is to understand the roots and the origins of social welfare programs and the history of social work. We want you to understand the role of government and the role of private agencies in the provision of services. And we want you to become knowledgeable about the types of social welfare services that are provided. At the beginning of the chapter, it provides a in-depth history about the profession of social work. And they really point back to the late 1800s when charity organization societies were established and the settlement movement were established. And both of these two different types of organizations approach their work with poor people and primarily immigrants. They approach that work a little bit differently. So your charity organization societies were really focusing on the individuals, so your direct practice. They started the field of casework and case management and really wanted to correct the individual. So focus on the individual and took an approach of assimilation. So the immigrant really needed to change in order to function in society. And so you can see that the contribution to the field was really to professionalize the field of social services, which eventually became the social work field that we all are in now. The settlement movement, on the other hand, really focused on communities and the establishment of houses within immigrant communities. So those were called settlement houses. And had more of a macro focus on the work that they did and really was active in society in the establishment of various social policies, which you can read about in the book. And also didn't really focus on the individual needing to change to function in society. So didn't really take the same assimilation approach that the charity organizations took. They really thought that society needed to change rather than the individual. The book moves into government roles. And so this diagram shows you the federal government being sort of the big brother when it comes to government roles. And so the federal government really is the funder for most of the state, tribal, and local social services that are provided. They control the rules and the regulations, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and how those funds can be spent and how services are delivered. There are some direct service providers. The Veterans Administration is one example of that. Indian Health Services, so that's for members of federally recognized tribes, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs delivers social services on tribal reservations. But for the most part, the federal government provides funding to the state, tribal, and local agencies, as well as other agencies, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So state governments are similar to the federal government. They're structured pretty similarly. They have governors that serve as the executive chief of the state, and they have different departments underneath the state that deliver services. And so those programs are recipients of federal funds, and those funds actually get funneled down to the community level. Tribal governments are separate than the state. There are currently 573 federally recognized tribes in the United States. There are 22 tribal governments in Arizona. They're often eligible to receive specially designated funds from the federal government due to the federal trust relationship. So that federal trust relationship obligates the federal government to support tribal self-government and the social welfare of tribes and tribal citizens. So Tribes may also be eligible for state funding, and so this is known as a pass-through funding agreement. And so, especially in instances where tribes aren't eligible, but the states are, an example of that is Medicaid. So, tribal medical service providers can't establish their own Medicaid programs, but they can partner with the state in order to receive Medicaid funding for their patients. Also, sometimes the tribes opt not to receive funding because the state has a greater capacity to administer the funds. And so a tribe may opt not to receive federal funding directly and partner with the state. And then the local governments. There are 90,000 local governments in the United States, numerous types of governing bodies. In Arizona, we have counties, cities, towns that provide social services. And if you take a look at the website of the city or town or even county that you work in, I Google the name of the city and put commissions, and you'll see that there are various commissions that are established by municipal governments that a regular citizen like yourself could participate in. And additionally, there's at the local level, there's school boards that have governing power over schools and some of the programs that they deliver. The private sector. The private sector includes private for-profit, private non-profit, public charities, and foundations. And so the funders not only include federal and state grants, but corporate donors, individual donors, social enterprise, so socially innovative ways to make funding to raise funds are included within the private sector. The book talks about the invisibility of government and cites a study called the submerged state. And so you all took the test, the list of 21 services, and so you most likely checked off one of those services that you've received. And so this is referencing a 2012 study where 57% of respondents reported having never ever used a social program. But when they took that list of programs, 96% reported using at least one of the programs, and 2/3 reported using 4 or more. So that demonstrates that there's a higher use of government programs than people realize. And this impacts the actual support that these programs have in our society. So if people don't know that they're receiving them or the benefits that they provide, then they're less likely to support those programs. In the book on pages, starting with page 135 through 139, it describes the different forms of social welfare services. This is an infographic from a federal website. Get help with living expenses. The link is right here. So these slides will be posted underneath the video. And so you can take a look at this website for yourself. I thought it was pretty useful. It had some good information. Okay, so in this module, I invited a case management supervisor within the permanent supportive housing programs at Native American Connections. So Native American Connections is a private nonprofit entity that serves not just Native Americans, it serves any person that is in need of treatment, IOP treatment. It serves children and families, but they also have another set of services around housing and affordable housing. And this is what we're focusing on with this case example. So take a look at those videos and listen to what Stephanie brings and talks about as her role as a social worker in those programs, and how the funding agencies and policies impact her practice. Your next steps. So read chapter 5 of the text. It's a pretty quick read compared to the other chapters. View those case example videos of Native American Connections housing, and complete assignment 6 by the usual time on Sunday, and that's due on October 6th. Hope you have a great day. Feel free to reach out if you have questions. Thank you.